Today, I want to talk about four popular classroom practices that I don't love for struggling readers or kids with dyslexia. Now, I'll start by saying I think all teachers are very well meaning and that many of these popular activities work great for most kids, but they're just not ideal for those kids who aren't great readers yet. So I'm going to share those with you so you can be aware of them and give you some alternatives that might work better for your kid that is a struggling reader or a child with dyslexia. Number one, requiring kids to read independently for 20 minutes a night. This is an almost universal suggestion of elementary school teachers, and wide reading has tons of benefits for kids. However, if your child is a struggling reader or a child with dyslexia, they are likely not able to read accurately enough yet to get the benefits of wide reading. They're missing words, they're getting stuck on words, and that time spent looking at a book turns into guessing practice. They're making lots of mistakes, and it can end up being actually harmful for them because they're missing the words so much. They're not getting stable representations of that word. They're not getting accurate practice with their decoding. And of course, it can be very frustrating for the child, and it can become a battle for you as a parent trying to get them to read that 20 minutes every night. This can be all averted if instead of having them read independently for 20 minutes, we allow them to listen to audiobooks or we count time spent with a parent reading aloud to them. I also recommend if your child is doing specialized tutoring after school, like with Read Write, that time count towards their 20 minutes of recommended reading time per night. The second thing that I don't love is certain types of spelling practice. So yes, kids need to practice their spelling and they need to practice for their spelling tests on Friday. However, really don't want to do any spelling homework that's busy work. This is things like having the student copy the word 3 times, having the student write the word in rainbow colors, having the student draw a heart and write the word in it. These are all very common practices that teachers assign as a way to practice spelling that really aren't aligned to how our brain learns to spell. Now, if you're a typically developing student, it might help you just having more exposures to that word. But a kid with dyslexia, a struggling reader, they really need to focus on processing those sounds in the words and connecting the letters to those sounds. So the best way for them to practice is just for someone, a parent, an adult, to call the words out and for them to practice actually spelling them. So yes, it does take more time with the parent. It's not something you can just say, hey, do this while I cook dinner, but it is more beneficial. So if your school maybe assigns something like write the word in rainbow colors to make that more beneficial for your student, just call that word out and have them pick a marker and write it, switch to a different marker or maybe a crayon to write it for the next word. If your school is asking you to do something like draw a snowman and write the words in a snowman, you can just like quickly draw a snowman on their paper and then let them spell the words within that snowman. I think most teachers are fine with that if they see it is benefiting the student. The third thing that I don't love are reading logs. So a reading log is some type of record where the child will write down usually the title of the book, the author, and the number of pages they read to document or prove that they're reading during their independent reading time. So a lot of teachers use reading logs to encourage home reading, but sometimes they're also used within school. I know to us as adults, it does not seem like a big deal to have a child fill in the name of the book and the author and those kinds of things. But for your struggling reader, that can be daunting having to write down that book title and author, especially if it's for an activity that they don't really prefer in the first place. It can just feel like administrative busy work that they don't want to do. So I find it actually ends up discouraging reading, and we're trying to, encourage it. So some alternatives, I've seen some really simple reading logs where instead of having to write down a bunch of information, the student just like colors in, um, maybe it's an apple for September or a pumpkin for October. They just color in an object to show or to indicate that they read that night, or just not doing the reading log at all and just encouraging them through just more motivation tactics in your classroom to keep reading and keep improving can be really beneficial. Okay, the fourth thing that I don't love is having kids learn sight words, those high frequency, irregular words at the very beginning of kindergarten, and definitely not before kindergarten in K4 or earlier. So for our kids that are struggling readers, oftentimes at the start of kindergarten, they are still working on connecting letters and to their most common sounds. So learning that A says ah and getting a really stable representation of that. That is crucial for them to start reading and start figuring out those three-letter words like cat, bat. We really want to emphasize the most regular patterns in the language first. So it's difficult that when you're working so hard to connect A says at and being able to figure out a word like cat or bat, the student is also being asked to learn the word R, A-R-E. And that can end up being quite confusing. So I recommend delaying the focus on sight words until a little later in the year, or at least until you're sure that each child is confident with all of their letters and most common sounds.